has done a few things in his life that might interest you, and you know, I just sit back and relax and visit with Jay, and he'll talk with you and visit with him, and I'm sure anytime anybody has anything to say, you want to have some discussion with him, that's fine. It's going to be one of those sessions. And you may want to incorporate some of what you hear today into your answer on the final assignment, okay? So any questions at all? Jay Flores. Jay has had an interesting life, okay? So, anyway. But Jay, I appreciate your, and Jay's done this before. He taught with this same class, not the same class, but the same topic. Here is the Friends of the Baby, several years ago. Did a great job. We really had a great time. And I think we all learned a lot from that. So, Jay, thank you very much.
Well, first and foremost, my name is John Jay Flores. Everybody knows me as Jay. Born and raised in Big Spring, Texas, not far away from here. But before I begin, I want to give honor where honor is due. And that is Mr. Professor Dr. Keith Bush. Did I pronounce
you
it right?
did.
And then, of course, my Aunt Dora Dominguez. She is the one that started the whole process. And I'm going to pass out these flyers here to you guys. They're just little information and stuff that you can get a hold of. Just pass them back. Here, there's a couple more there.
Dora, you were in psychology, right?
When?
Psychology, right?
Yes.
You go by. I know we have some psychology majors in here. Dora Carey graduated from here with a degree in psychology and still works here, right?
Yep, I do.
Yeah.
Me and-
Some of you may be familiar with Aunt Dora.
Dean of the family.
Amber
Yeah.
and I, Dr. Keekbush, Amber and I work for the Dean of the Students.
Okay.
So if anybody ever needed anything,
And if you're ever in trouble, you know, she can be bribed.
you definitely.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Jay.
That's okay. So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to be here. It is an honor and privilege, and I tell my wife a lot about what I share in these classrooms, and of course I try to document them and record them so that I can go back and figure out what I left out that I thought was important and what I didn't say or share. I've been in state and federal penitentiary. I've got 13 and a half years of my life being incarcerated. I am married. I have 7 children total. Nicholas here is my son, and recently through Ancestry.com, I found out I had another child. And you are now 24 years of age, and it's crazy, this technology. But by the grace of God, you know, God, I'm very, very faith-driven, and I'll share that with you and why. So when I was raised by a very lovely home. My mom, my dad left my mom when I was 1 year old, so I had no dad. During the time, my mom had me very active in sports. I became a baseball player, and I was actually pretty good at it. In fact, I tell people, had I not done what I went through, I could be a major league professional baseball player. But unfortunately, God had other plans. So at the age of 8, I started smoking cigarettes. My mom used to have this big old ashtray. Back in the 80s and 70s, I know you guys are like 19 and 20, so y'all wouldn't really know what these big old ashtrays look like, right?
Most of these people, Jay, weren't
They're
alive. when I-
youngsters. They're youngsters. So these ashtrays were huge, right? And my mom would put out her cigarettes, and I would go and I would steal a cigarette here and there, and I'd go out to the back, me and my cousin, and we would smoke cigarettes. And one particular incident that I vividly remember, but it's one that I'll never forget, and it's probably where my criminal thinking started. And I tell people all the time, you know, we all have a choice. You know, you have a choice to do right and to do wrong, right? Well, I chose the latter. And so I grabbed a cigarette, and we were in the back, and we were smoking a cigarette, me and my cousin, or my cousin and I. And my sister walks in, and when she walked in, she's like, I'm gonna tell. She was 5 years old, right? So what do? I grabbed her by the hand, pulled her in, the cigarette that I had lit, I put it in her mouth, closed her nostrils, and she had no choice but to inhale, right? So once she inhaled, she started coughing up her lungs, and I said, okay, so now if you snitch on me, you were smoking too, right? So I tell people that because, you know, even though she was innocent and she had just busted me, I felt like, okay, well, if I get caught, you're gonna get caught with me. And so the story goes that from that point of smoking my cigarettes, I started smoking worse things, marijuana, and little by little, I think I was maybe 9.5, maybe 10 years old. First started smoking weed, and by 11 I was already drinking alcohol, full-blown alcohol. Unfortunately, one of my best friends, where we lived at, was a dealer. His mom and dad were pot dealers. And I remember going to the refrigerators, and they had chunks of marijuana inside the refrigerator. And every once in a while I'd go in there and I'd pop a bud or two, roll it up, and we'd go and smoke, right? And it wasn't long after that we started drinking, and of course that's where everything just started going downhill. But one of the things that I go back and I ask myself, where did I go wrong? Why did I go wrong? I try to lean towards the fact that I had no dad. So I told you guys earlier that I was very active in sports. I remember whenever we were going to the baseball games, everybody had daddy, screaming and hollering, giving these kids or their child, you know, props. I had no one. The only person I had was a friend of mine. Her name is Miss Kathy Perez, and of course her son was Joey Perez. And I remember going to their house at a very young age, and of course I got Joey to start smoking pot as well. And so then he too started the same lifestyle that I got into. The difference was I got caught and he didn't. But I always remember, you know, had I had a dad in my life, maybe I would have turned out the way I turned out. Because I grew up with a loving family. You know, my whole family, you know, back in the old days, you know, we had family and we were strong family. And we had, 12, 14, somewhere around there. And every year for Christmas or for the holidays, you know, we all got together. So I could never blame the family, you know. What if, you know, mommy wouldn't have ever left dad? And what if, you know, I had not been separated from my mom to my grandmother, which what happened in between the time that I was growing up. So my grandmother actually raised me. She was my mom. I always addressed her as mom. But once I started drinking alcohol and stuff, it got really bad to the point where, you know, my grandmother couldn't control me. And it was really sad because I remember Grandpa whipping me with the belt, and I would run under the beds and I would hide, and until one day, Grandpa got smart and put wheels on the bed where I would go and hide under this big old king size bed. He would try to whip me, right? But he couldn't reach me, and I'd go, ah. And so one day when I came home after school, I don't remember the exact incident, but I got in trouble and Grandpa pulled out the belt. Well, I ran under the same bed that I had done many times. And this time he just whoop, and it came right out, and boy, he got me. But I say all that to say this, you know, when I started smoking weed, people always say, oh, you know, weed is not bad, you know, smoking cigarettes wasn't bad. But I honestly believe that smoking cigarettes was a gateway to the smoking the pot, the drinking the alcohol, because curiosity killed the cat, right? But one of the things that I often, you know, think to myself when I started doing the drugs is that how could I have gotten this far into crime, which is what I'm leading to, is crime. You know, once I started smoking the drugs, of course, I would see people with money, you know, especially the two people that were the dealers, and maybe I shouldn't say their names, but these two people that dealt dope, the ones that had the big old packages of marijuana in the refrigerators, man, I see wads of money. And, you know, when we were being raised, we weren't the richest people. You know, I remember getting clothes at Salvation Army and stuff like that, and of course, what child wouldn't want the best of the best? So, unfortunately, I started dealing weed, and, you know, dealing weed in school, I never got busted at school, but then whenever I run out of weed, I had to have money to supply my weed, so what would I do? Turn to crime. One of the first incidences that I had breaking into a home, which I did get caught and I did get charged for it, was burglary of habitation. I was 15 years of age, somewhere around there. And I remember my friend, he was about, I don't know, 5'6", somewhere around there. He picked me up, I crawled into the window, went in there, stole VCR. Back then, VCRs and TVs was the thing. So I stole the TV and the VCR, we sold it, got a bunch of drugs, and we started selling again. And I had my fix for that week. Of course, later down the line, I started doing cocaine and acid and whatnot. I took my first hit of acid when I was in the 5th grade. There was a skeleton. I won't ever forget this. That skeleton came alive, and it was moving, and I seen the, you know, if any of y'all have ever done LSD, I'm telling you right now, that stuff back then was very potent. And I remember seeing that skeleton, and it started to dance, per se, and it freaked me out. Mr. C, who is he's passed away. Mr. C was my science teacher, and he knew something was wrong. And he told us to go to the principal's office, and me and my friend, we walked out that front door and skipped the rest of the day. But when I started selling drugs, of course, I shot dope from the time I was, 17 or 16. I stuck my first needle in my veins, and I still have the track marks to show it. I'm not very proud of the things that I did, but I believe that doing everything that I did has made me the man that I am today. Of course, now I run a business, and it's a great business. It's flourishing. I give God the glory for that. But as a dealer, you know, you start, as a junkie, I'll say that first. I was a junkie for a good 4 or 5 years before I actually started selling big time cocaine. And when I say big time, I wasn't what's that dude's name that just got busted and dug the tunnel? God, what was his name? Chapo. So yeah, I wasn't no Chapo. But to me, the money that I was bringing in was pretty amazing. I bring in 5 to 8 grand a week selling cocaine. But before I started dealing the big amounts of cocaine, I was shooting dope, smoking crack. And one day I looked at myself in the mirror and I told myself, never again, I'm never gonna shoot. It was 102, 103 degrees outside, and here I was wearing the long sleeves, and I was ashamed. My grandma was still alive at the time, and I told myself, I said, you know what? I'm done shooting up. The girlfriend that I had with me, I gave her a choice. I said, look, I'm gonna quit shooting up tomorrow. Well, of course, who's gonna believe a junkie to actually make those statements and actually go through with it, right? And I did. I quit, and I had a little bitty 20 of cocaine, which is about a 1/4 gram, and that 1/4 gram became 2 ounces within the next day. And then from there, that's when I started dealing dope. But the matter of the fact is, you know, when I went to prison, or actually I went to, and please excuse me because I don't ever write anything down, I just speak, you know, with thoughts of my past and whatnot. But when I first went and got in trouble, and I remember I told you I broke into that trailer house, I got caught. Cops picked me up down at the Runnels Junior High. They came in, called me into the principal's office, and I was charged. This is the first crime I was actually convicted of. Went to the police department, and unfortunately the guy that did the crime with me snitched me out. And so I ended up getting probation. Didn't last on probation, maybe a month or 2. Went right back to jail for a second burglary of habitation. After that, they sent me to a place in Abilene, Texas. It was like a rehabilitation for juveniles. And of course, I didn't last long there either. Took off after about a month, came back home. Now, I was close to being 18 at that time. And so whenever I broke the law again, I got a third burglary rehabilitation. And this time, they told me I was going to the big house. And that's when everything just kind of hit me. I said, okay, here I am. Been in and out of jail for various times now. I'm barely 17 years of age, fixing to turn 18. And now I'm facing prison in the big house, Texas Department of Criminal Justice. So they gave me 6 years of TDC and went to prison, and that's where it all began. So after that, I got out, and it was just a continuous cycle. I was going in and out, in and out. It wasn't until a few years later that I actually started selling cocaine to the point where I could maintain, buy a vehicle, buy a house, and the money just started rolling in. Of course, me, of who I was, all I ever experienced was the strip clubs, and you know, I had people that sold drugs for me there. I sold drugs to lawyers, officers of the law. I sold drugs to people that you would least think about, but you know, they're all there. And I understand that a lot of y'all are pursuing a job in being an officer, FBI, DEA, whatever. So for me to stand here in front of y'all and tell y'all that I had a loving home. It's not like I was treated bad at home. You know, I'd like to think that it was that I didn't have a dad in my life that made me do all these things, but it wasn't that really. Overall, I think it was just something that happened because I had no priorities. You know, I was very disobedient to my mom, and my life was just all screwed up, you know. Of course, when I went to prison, I got involved with gangs. Now, back up just a little bit, I also was in a very dark time in my life to the point where I wanted to commit suicide. I don't think I've ever really shared that. But I basically, I didn't want to live anymore because I didn't want to give my mom the grief that I was giving her simply because, you know, she said some words that I'll never forget. She's still to this day. She said, "John Jay, I wish you were never born." And that hurt. That hurt me a lot. And of course, when you hear that from your own mom, you know you're a pretty bad dude. And I finally realized, I said, you know what, I'm going down the wrong way. But I didn't care. I was very evil. I did things I am not proud of. Things that I wouldn't dare say to y'all because it would discriminate me, you know. With all stuff aside, I did a lot of evil stuff. And one of the last times that I went to prison, like I said, I've been to state and federal. I don't know if I mentioned that. But I did finally hit the big league. I call that the big league. Was Federal Bureaus of Investigations had me under investigation a few years ago in the late 90s, I believe, 1989. I think they had this sting operation called the Purple Cow. The Purple Cow consisted of a lot of, I think it was over 240 drug busts in Big Springs, and it was West Texas wide, all the way from El Paso, or what we call Chuco, all the way to Lubbock, San Angelo, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston. And I happened to get caught in the middle. They got me for under 500 grams of powdered cocaine. They offered me a life sentence. And I remember to this day, you know, because I did get affiliated when I went to TDCJ, I got affiliated with a prison gang by the name of West Texas. Back then it was called Wessel. I'm sure some of y'all might have heard of Dongo Blast or West Texas or whatnot. And the word Dongo actually represents Towns Against Notorious Gang Offenders, Organizations, sorry. Towns Against Notorious Gang Organizations. We started that in prison because a lot of the gangs, Mexican Mafia, Raza Unida, Aryan Brotherhood, Black Guerrillas, you name it, they already had their established gangs in prison, and we being West Texas, San Angelo, Lubbock, Abilene, all the surrounding cities, even all the way back to El Paso, we were being used as guinea pigs from the Aztecas, which is a gang association from El Paso, and we called them crash dummies, or they called us crash dummies, because basically I'd say, okay, you're gonna go and beat up these people over here because he's got a green light on him. And what it means to have a green light, it means that you either snitch somebody off or you owe somebody money, and therefore they put a green light on you. And so they were using us to do these crazy assaults on people in prison, and some of our guys would end up getting more time. You know, some people would get life sentences because they killed somebody. So then West Texas decided we're gonna start our own gang, and we're gonna name it West, or Del West, or Puro West. There's like 20,000 names for it. And I was one of the original guys that started it. I also was part of a group called PREA. It's called the Prison Rape Elimination Act. Okay, I was one of the guys that whenever you came in as a prison offender, you would come in, and I had the paperwork on you, everything. I would go through it, figure out where you were from. Once I find out where you were from, I would then send information to my soldiers, and then they would go and check you, or you know, call you out, and then you would come, whether you were white, black, Mexican. Normally if you were black, you'd be, you know, the black people would deal with you. If you were white, etc. But because I was in this organization and I was part of the PREA, and this was also done through the sergeant in TDCJ. See, these are very well established officers who would pick people like me because not only did I know everyone, but I was very well respected, and because I was a gang leader, they took the opportunity to take advantage of me. But what they didn't know is I used manipulation to get information from people so that I can then turn it into my soldiers, and then once the soldiers would go, they would get either beat up, someone would even get raped. Now, I say that our gang did not do any rapes of that sort. Mexican Mafia and the major Texas Syndicate, they did those kind of crimes. We were just towns gathering to help against these people. Because without that, you know, they were just taking advantage of us. If you were just a Mexican, you came into prison, they're gonna come and check you, and they're gonna take you, and either they're gonna make you do something, you know, whether you like it or not. And that's where my mentality is being evil. I had a heart, but because my heart had been stomped on so many times, I felt like, you know, who cares? If I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die by the sword. So I gave it my 100. So when I became a gang affiliated individual, I was willing to die for the name of my gang. So back to the Prison Rape Elimination Act. So what that happened, that was put out in the late 80s, maybe early 90s. There was a judge that had his son that was raped in prison, and they passed this law to where you would have to go through this schooling, or you would have to get educated based on if you seen a crime, if you seen an individual being raped in front of you, you would have to report it. If you failed to do so, you would be charged automatically, and you would also go down for seeing it and not saying anything. So that started a big, big deal in the prison system. But since I was one of the leaders of our prison, I was kind of like a general. Most gangs, they have soldiers, then they have their sergeants, then they had their lieutenants, then they had their captains, then they had the general. And that's basically how we had ours, only ours is more like soldiers, and then you had a sergeant, and then you had the general, which I was. Anytime I went to any prison, I've been to over 27 prisons throughout the state of Texas. And because I've been to so many prisons, simply because we were either in gang wars and or whatever the case, you know, they would ship me because I was the head person. So then they would take me and ship me to another prison. hoping that I wouldn't put out the word that this guy here snitched somebody off, and then, 2-3 months later, he'd end up dead. But, because I was, in this particular position, I had a lot of stress on me, I didn't wanna hurt anybody, but because I was almost bullied, and pressured, peer pressure, it was one of the hardest things for me. But I did gain a bunch of respect from individuals around me, especially from other gang members, and they would come to me and say, hey, one of your people, meaning somebody in the West Texas gang, disrespected this guy, so now you have to go investigate it, simply because it's your person. So I wouldn't go and start a war. A lot of people, they would just wanna go and stab and fight. I was the type that I would investigate it, and before we would start a war with the other race, I try to not go there. Of course, when I went to federal prison, I told myself there was 3 or 4 federal units in Big Spring, Texas. And I remember many times passing by the FCI Big Spring, I said, I'm gonna be there one day. Who says that, right? I did. And sure enough, I ended up at the Big Spring Federal Prison. Once I got there, I got connected with some of the biggest mafias, whether it was the cartel in Guaritos or Juarez, or whether it was in Okinana. So basically, it was a ground for me to get more contacts, and that's the way it went down. When I got out of FCI Big Springs, I got sent over to Odessa, or here, right? Odessa, it was called the Clover House. And when I was here at the Clover House, I got connected with a couple of guys, and man, I just got more connections that way. But long story short, my grandma got ill, and because I had been in and out of prison so many times, unfortunately, I had children outside that I didn't even know about. Nicholas being the man that I now know. We were, 2 years ago? Something like that?
3 years ago.
3 years ago. We did the Ancestry.com. He found out that a lot of my tias were related to me, and one day I get a call and said, hey, don't freak out. That was his first word, don't freak out, but you're my dad. I didn't panic, I didn't freak out, because I knew because of my history that there's a possibility that I had probably more than one kid out there. But right now it's just 7 of us. Okay, so, yes, there was a lot of officers involved. And I'm not telling y'all this to simply put them down or anything. I mean, that's just life, right? There's bad cops, there's good cops, there's bad jailers, good jailers, whatnot. But unfortunately, whenever I was affiliated with this gang, I got to meet a bunch of officers that did a bunch of dirty work. They would bring in the drugs or whatnot, and of course we would distribute them, and we got cash inside of prisons, even though you weren't supposed to, and they got paid thousands and thousands of dollars. But in this information, that Theodora, what exactly do we have on the?
I put your
website?
company, your information, your company, and your social media.
Okay, so that goes now to show you where I'm at today. I did become a Christian while on my last incarcerations. And the reason I bring that up is because, I didn't really care about my life. When I did something, I did it to the fullest. Like I told y'all before, I was a very evil mentality. I figured, if I can go in the middle of a burning home and to save someone, I mean, that's the type of person I am. I'm passionate about saving people, and that's what I try to do now. I now run a business. Right now, I've got about 4 guys that work for me, and not to exaggerate, but I do live comfortably. We just recently bought our 3rd home, because we're downsizing from 3,500 square feet to 2,500 square feet. That's not really downsizing if you went to look at our home. Anyways, but we are in. I met my wife about 11 years ago. Of course, that's about the time that my grandmother got sick. My grandma is old school, abuelita, you know. She made the tortillas at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. She was cooking, getting ready to feed everybody. And then, I mean, I might be exaggerating on how early, but man, I'll tell you what, right around 6 o'clock a.m. every single day for, God, 30, 40 some odd years. She was reading her Bible in the morning and she read it again at night. Very, very, very strong woman. And we had found out she had cancer, and that's where my mind told me, I says, look, I'm either gonna end up 6 foot underground, you know, I'm gonna die, or I'm gonna end up in prison for the rest of my life. And it wasn't a really hard choice to make at the end, because I had just ran into an old friend who I had met when I had ran away to California at the age of 16. It was supposed to be a 2-week deal, right? Go to California. I ended up staying like 4 to 6 months. Seen this girl for like a split second, and then fast forward 18 years ago, I met her in Big Springs with my best friend. And of course now we ended up getting married. But whenever I brought her to my grandma's, my grandma made these comments. She said, that's her, mija. That's the one you're gonna marry. And to be honest, I was touched and I teared up a little bit, because my grandma had never told me that. And I just, you know, they say that mothers have a special intuition, and she did. I ended up marrying her, and she's a nurse practitioner in Big Springs, and I own a business by the name of J Handyman. The first letter J means Jesus, like Jesus Christ, and the second one is me, because that's where, you know, Jesus was the carpenter, and so that's really where I got the name from. I do live comfortably. I get, right now I've got 3 jobs going in Big Springs. It's a blessing to be able to know. Right now I'm struggling a little bit because I got sick, and of course COVID hit. That kind of messed everybody up, right? But overall, I'm doing pretty good. I still have my health. I'm still alive. I'm still here in front of you guys. And it's just an honor to be here in front of y'all. I know it kind of went pretty fast, but that's just the way I am. I like to be able to just to speak it out in the moment of time. I don't know how long I got, so what is my time limit here?
About 3:10.
3:10? Okay, so it is now, okay, we got some time. So, if there's any questions whatsoever, like I said, I understand you guys are gonna be future officers, whatever. You can ask me anything you want, you know, because, trust me, for a very long time, I would sit down and try to figure out where I went wrong. You know, there's so much research on a criminal-minded person and where they go wrong, but in truth, I couldn't find anything in mine. You know, I mean, I had a loving family. I had a abuelita that just took care of me, very loving. And when she got sick, is when I realized, okay, look, I don't want my grandma to die knowing that Mijo was gonna end up in prison for the rest of her life, or worse, being dead. And at that split moment, I remember, I got on my knees and I prayed, and I said, okay, look, dude, you say you're real. Because I gotta remember, I was dark and evil. When I say that, I was also a high priest of Satan in the Big Spring area. I had over 200, maybe about 270 members. They would all come from San Angelo, Sweetwater, Lubbock, La Mesa, Midland, Odessa, and we would have seances. Now, I didn't go and kill babies or anything like that, but I did drink human blood. Back then, I didn't realize, you know, because I would probably gone to jail for that too, but the animals, you know, that was just plain stupid, sick, evil stuff. But I did it, because I thought in my mind, you know, whatever I had to do to please this man down there, I'm willing to die for him. And so I did a lot of sick stuff that now, as a Christian, like I said, I accepted my Lord and Savior right before my grandma passed away. And that's when I made the decision, when I said, look, dude, I know if you're up there, you need to show me. I said, because at the rate I'm going, either I'm gonna die or I'm gonna end up in prison. And I'll tell you what, just things kept falling into place. And there's absolutely no way whatsoever I can deny it. I could tell you a million stories about the miracles and all this stuff, and I ain't talking about just a little bitty miracle. I'm talking about I go out, lay hands on you, and you're healed from cancer. That's something that just don't happen, you know, and that's somewhat in the lines that he did for me. My entire life turned around overnight because I heard a voice that told me to get up and go towards Midland. Well, there is nothing in Big Springs, you know, Highway 80. How many of y'all are familiar with Big Springs? Any of y'all? You, okay, you too. Okay, so when you're coming from Big Springs, all you have is that one prison on the right, and the rest is just flat land, right? Well, as I was coming down the road, like I tell you, I heard a voice that told me, hey, get up and go towards Midland. That's all I heard. I'm like, okay. So I got up, went over there, and I was driving what I call the rusted bucket. The rusted bucket was Betty's car. It had a hole like the Flintstones, you know, the little Flintstones, you do your feet like that, and you could haul butt. Well, that's the way her car was. Matter of fact, it was a good drug dealer's car, because if I had dope, I'd throw it down on the floorboard and they'd go on the highway, right? But seriously though, on a serious note, when I drove up to the stop sign, I turned in and I just started bawling. You know, here I had my arms with needles, coughing up my lungs from smoking crack. That's earlier that day. Earlier that night, I had smoked crack for about 2 days straight, and I was broke again. The girl that I was with slept with 4 brothers, all within a day. So I was devastated. I was broke, I was upset, and I was ready to go. And when I heard that still voice inside of me, and I drove over towards, you know, like I said again, at the outskirts of Big Springs. When I turned in, I started crying. I opened up my eyes and I looked across the street, and there's a guy over there cutting a door. And I drove across the street, and I walk up to this dude, and I said, okay, look, bro, don't freak out, don't panic. I said, but God told me to come over here. He looked at me, and he's like, what? He's like, what do you mean God told you to come up here? I said, I'm just telling you, bro. Well, as soon as I said that, he starts crying. And I'm like, wait a minute, bro, why are you crying? He's like, I just prayed and asked God to send someone to me. And when he said that, boy, my entire body just broke down. And I gave him a hug, and we both started crying, and people were honking on the highway, beep, beep, beep. And so I got up and I was like, okay, look, man, my entire life I've always wanted to work in the construction business. And I'm tired of being broke. I'm tired of being broke mentally. I'm tired of being broke physically. And I know that there's something there for me that's going to change. And he said, well, you know what? I prayed for God to bring me someone that knew how to do construction. I was like, well, I could do everything. He's like, really? He's like, yeah, really. He said, well, here's the big question. How much do you want to get paid? Well, back then, minimum wage was $7.25 an hour. And I remember vividly, I had read a scripture that same day. It said, how does it go? Humble yourself before the Lord and he will lift you up. Well, because of my educational background, now I'm not a highly educated intellectual like my tia Dora. She's got a great, great brain. But me, I just felt like I didn't have it in me. I know I do. Don't get me wrong, I know I do. Yeah, look at my son. My son's already got your bachelor's, right? No, master's. I mean,
bachelor's.
That. So he's like, I'll tell you what, man, I will work for you for minimum wage for 2 weeks. If so you feel inclined to give me a raise after that 2-week period, then so be it. We shuck on it. He gave me the keys to this apartment. Now here's a guy I don't know from Adam. He gave me the keys. He says, I'm gonna open you up an account at Ace Hardware, and you can go over there and charge everything you need, because I can feel that you're a good guy. I says, I am. I'm a man of my word. So I worked for him for 2 weeks. I sat probably 24, maybe not 24, around 20 toilets, 20 vanities, mirrors. I hung like 8, 9 doors. When he came back, needless to say, he was very impressed. He's like, boy, you really do know how to do construction, don't you? I was like, yes, sir, that's one of the gifts I've gotten. He said, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna double your salary to $15 an hour. I want you to find 2 people that you trust that will work under you, and we'll go from there. And so I did. I started that, and then before he left that day, I says, look, I'm here for a season. I don't know how much longer I'm gonna be with you, but I know that there's big plans headed my way. Cause someone promised me I got big plans, so I'm just letting you know I'm gonna work until I'm told not to work for you no more. He's like, deal. Approximately maybe a month and a half later, and I didn't have a place to do my ties, so that's something else, but I was giving grandma some of my ties. I woke up one day and I read something. It said, you have fought the good fight, you have finished the race. And I knew right there and then it was time to move forward. Dora believed in me when other people didn't. So many people didn't believe in me, and but she did. And I'm very grateful to her. She was one of the first people that bought my business cards. She bought me my first stickers for my side of a truck. And anyways, here's the crazy thing, and we'll end with that, and then y'all can question. Whenever I read that scripture, it said, you have fought the fight, you have finished the race. I told, his name was Juan. I told Juan, I said, I'm done, bro. I said, I've been told to move forward. And he said, okay. And he gave me my last check. My last check, it was like $270 something for a couple of days or something like that. And I remember I all I had left over, because I believe I'd given my grandma all the money except the $75 or whatever it was. I can't remember exactly. Well, don't you know, I went over to the Big Spring Herald, because that's what I felt led to do. The amount that I had left in my pocket was the exact amount it took for me to advertise my first business. Here's the kicker. I filled out an application about my business, J&J Handyman. I didn't know how to name my business. I'm like, what am I gonna name it? Jesus Christ and Jay Flores Handyman Services. I gave that to the receptionist. She grabbed it. Fast forward, that was on a Friday. Saturday morning, I get a call. And it was an elderly lady. She's like, hi, this is so-and-so. I'm looking for a J&J handyman. I said, well, you called the right person, but how in the world did you get my number? She said, well, I'm looking at the newspaper right now, and there you are right in front of me. I'm like, really? I said, how in the world did that happen? Well, find out. And get this is crazy. Get ready. About 3-4 months ago, I went to go make my payments. I've been paying this business now for 9+ years. Went over there and I was talking to an individual. Now, Amanda Fairmont or something like that, she used to be the Big Spring Herald writer. Mm-hmm. Well, her friend was the one that took my money that day. She told me, she said, when you turned in that application for your business, I could see like a bright shyness to it. Someone told me to pick it up and go turn it in to the people that actually make the newspapers. Now, mind you, when you do your paperwork, you don't get it turned in to the following week. So in truth, my business shouldn't have came out that same next day, right? But someone told her, get it and take it over there. It got processed at 3:30 in the morning. Saturday morning, my name was in the paper to where that elderly woman got to call me. I made $800 in one day. And from there, God the glory, because I have been getting businesses. I tell people all the time, I said, when I'm broke, or when I feel like I'm getting broke, I get panicky, right? Because I got a lot of bills to pay. But it never ceased to amaze me. 2 to 3 days later, I always get a $5,000 to $10,000 remodel. And there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you got any questions, believe me, I am not ashamed of nothing. So I don't care if you want to ask me what I did, how I did it, as long as it don't incriminate me, I'm all good. Anybody got any questions?
What made the difference, Jay?
What made the difference on what, sir?
I mean, you told us what you used to be like, and we can see what you are now.
Yes, sir.
Can you identify one or two things or people that made a difference to you? I mean,
Yeah, I can say the people that made a difference in my life is definitely my aunt. People that believed in me. Officer, I remember when I was incarcerated, there was one particular officer that always encouraged me. Now, you hear the horror stories of when you're incarcerated that, you know, we call them Ninja Turtles. This is when a group of officers get together to go do a raid at a certain cell or whatnot. Some of these officers would body slam individuals. I seen a 91, 98-year-old old man in a what do you call it, a cane, get body slammed and get killed by officers, various officers. So I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff that I probably should have seen, but there was one officer particularly that used to motivate me and used to inspire me and used to tell me good things, like, you know, hey, this is I see this in you, and I see potential. And my aunt always gave me encouraging words. She's like, you know, Milo, you can do whatever you want. My grandma probably was the #1 inspiration that I had, because in the back of my mind, I remember she would tell me to go water the yard, and I would say, like I'm gonna go out there and water the yard at 100-degree weather, you know? But I remember that, and now that she's gone, my yard looks pretty good. That was instilled in me, and it made a difference to be able to hear people speak positive words into my life instead of like, oh, you're never gonna, and I'll tell you what, there's people in my own family that said, he's Jay, he's never gonna change. But you know what, I beg to differ. I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna rise up and I'm gonna be somebody. And you know what, one of those people works for me now. He told me one time that I would never change. I remember we were working for Bob's Custom Woodwork out of Big Springs. He recently went out of business, but there was a guy there, and I remember him telling me that. And then fast forward to the past 7 years, actually he don't work for me now, but he had told me that I would never change. And you know what, he worked for me for, God, 7 years under me. So that just goes to show, look, don't be careful what you say, because you know, you yourself are gonna be, you know, going down that same path, and you might be working for someone you didn't like 20 years ago. But yeah.
You know, I asked because over the course of my life, Jay, I've had maybe 5 or 6 opportunities to be with somebody who had done time and who seemed to have their life put together.
Yes, sir.
And I've asked them, you know, what happened? What made a difference in the justice system?
Right.
And invariably, they would mention a correctional officer.
Yes.
Or an officer who.
A teacher.
Yeah, somebody like that. And
Correct.
I'm asking that because I'm looking at a bunch of people here who are probably gonna wind up working in the justice system. And by the way, it's a great place.
Yes.
To make
Good
a living
benefits.
and to make a difference with people like Jay and other people. And I'm kind of curious. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, and that is true in saying that, because I remember, you know, there was a teacher that I had. She did not like me at all. But at the end of the 9 months after I completed my vocational trade, she called me in her office by herself, and she told me, you know, out of all the individuals that have been here before you, you are one of the people I believe. You know, because we're in prison, and everybody in prison did something to go there. Now, not necessarily maybe 2 or 3%, you actually got falsely incarcerated, but you know, there were some of us that we are actually there for something we actually did. And of course, there's just so much negativity and so much evilness in the prison system that, you know, a good word from somebody could help a long way. It really will. Or Karen. Yes, sir.
What's some advice you would give someone that's struggling right now?
Advice that someone is struggling, just speak positive things into his life. You know, that's the problem I think with our society is there's so much negativity, especially now that we have it before our fingers. You know, if people get on the phone, they read the news or look at videos of so much negativity in this world, yet we fail to realize that there is so much positive that we can put into other people if you just simply speak it out and put it into their brain, because, you know, it's, in a biblical, perspective, they say, speak life, right? But in a non-biblical perspective, if you just tell something positive, it's gonna go and get within the depths of their cerebrium or whatever, and boom, next thing you know, they're running a whole business, or they're a freaking cook, a master chef, or whatever. I'm telling you, that works a lot. Just positive words, speak to those people. Yes, sir.
Can I add to that response?
No, absolutely.
Yeah. I think another thing too is I think to be a good listener, you know, a lot of times if somebody talks
Yes.
and you listen to them, the message you're sending is, hey, you're not a useless piece of shit.
Right.
I'm interested in what you have to say.
Right.
And to me,
And that's kind of how
always
I
good.
was. You know, so many people was, oh, you're never gonna amount to anything. But I think that's what kind of empowered me to want to do even better, because I'm gonna prove them wrong. Especially this quote unquote one officer who was in Big Springs. Don't you know, it's been a few years ago, I was at a convenience store and I tapped his shoulder and he turned around, his face got pale. And I said, thank you. And I shook his hand. He was very mean to me and very evil, but you know what? I turned that around and said, God bless you. And after that, I mean, every time I say, hey, how you doing, John? You know, everything changed. Changed his whole demeanor. Of course, he knew I was affiliated, but I'd never once thought, oh, I'm gonna take care of you when you're out of prison, when I'm out of prison, because we live in the same city. I did tell him that while I was in prison, I said, boy, don't you know I live here in Big Spring? But I never did. Anyways. Well, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you guys listening. Y'all seem like good listeners. I really appreciate it, and I hope and wish the best for you in lives. Whatever it is you're going through, always remember to be kind and instill positive words into people. If you have a drug addict in your family or anything, I do have YouTube videos. My name is Jay Flores. That's me. And so I do a lot of funny, dumb videos. But you'll be amazed at how much interesting and factual stuff is in them. For example, you guys all own a smartphone, and then you break in, you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to go pay $150 for whatever the deposit is for your phone. But you know you can get it done for free if it's less than a year old. A lot of people don't know that, but if you're interested, I don't know if those are on there. They are? Okay, so just go check it out. I got TikTok. I'm a TikToker too, so I do a lot of funny, dumb videos there. I do the chicken kicks and stuff like that. But, you know, they're pretty funny, and I'm not famous. I've got maybe 2,000 followers, but some of the videos I've got is like 16,000 views and whatnot. I plan to do more, so hopefully this will give me an opportunity to bring that and start, and I don't have to work no more, right? I can just do TikTok videos all day
Passive
long.
income.
All right, guys, well, thank you so much. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
I've got your quizzes here. I'll pass them back to you, and then you're free to go. Okay? And I'll see you Thursday. Again, I'll do just an informal discussion with you about labeling theory and pass out your final assignment.
See you tomorrow.
So, Aaliyah Marufo.
Appreciate it.